好，那10月份的我先给各位10月份的哦，那之后11月之后呢，我这个签过之后再跟大家确认这样。好，那下一次是9月21啦，好，只是先给大家10月份的。
Okay, everyone okay? Doing okay today? Staying. I was telling my friends that in all my years of living in Taiwan, I think that probably this is one of the most, I've never seen weather that's this unpredictable. You know what predict means, right? We've talked about this many times. Predict means to say what's going to happen, right? So when you watch the news, they usually have a weather forecast or a weather prediction. Forecast also means to say what's going to happen, but usually we use this word for weather. You know, we forecast that it's going to rain today. For, of course, F-O-R-E means before, right? So forecast means to say what's going to happen in the future. So we talk about weather forecast, but we could also say a weather prediction, P-I-O-N. But I was saying that the weather is so unpredictable. You know, I'll wake up in the morning and it will be like this, and by lunchtime it's pouring rain, and then 2 hours later the sun will be out again, and then by 2 hours after that it's pouring rain again. So yeah, it's really unusual weather. I feel like this is almost like, to me it feels like June weather, like, you know, when we have the Meiyu and it's raining. But anyhow, there's no water shortage, that's for sure. I think at least in Taichung we should not have a shortage of water because we've been getting so much rain so consistently almost every day. But yeah, that's fine. I told you before that after the drought of what, 2 years ago? About 2 years ago, I said I would never ever complain about rain again. So I'm not complaining. Yeah. Okay, so here I picked a weather-related article to start today. And it says here, summer was the hottest on record, meteorologists say. Now, what is a meteorologist? Kind of, but meteorology is usually what we talk about weather. Okay, so it's the study of weather patterns. Okay, whereas I think you said a climatology, of course, as you can see from the word, has to do with climate, 气候. So I think climatology is more of a broader, bigger thing, like maybe they talk about global warming and things. But meteorologist or meteorology is weather, basically. So often when you go to a news show, like TV news, if they might call someone a weather person or a weatherman but they often say meteorologist. That sounds more official. In the old days, we used to say, you know, weatherman, but of course now it's not a man always. It's, in fact, in Taiwan, I notice it's often a woman. But yeah, nowadays we would say meteorologist. Yeah. I don't think so. And so, you know, this word meteor, does everybody know what that means? How do you say it in Chinese? It's yeah, it falls from the sky. Well, it goes, you know, from space to Earth. Yeah, it's not a star, of course. And it's different from something else called a comet. Okay. I just read today that there's a comet passing near Earth, and it's only going to be, the next time it'll come by Earth, it'll be like 400 years from now. So you should probably see it now. But yeah, comet is something that doesn't come into Earth's atmosphere. It passes by. Usually it's quite large. I don't know how you say this in Chinese. Yeah, 卫星. Oh, 卫星. Okay. And then a meteor actually usually enters the Earth's atmosphere. Sometimes, well, usually it hits Earth. You can see them. So, you know, last month there was a meteor shower, right? Every year you have these meteor showers. And I remember many years ago, I remember going during a meteor shower. We went up, my friends and I went up to Daxueshan, and we found a good spot and we watched the meteor showers because it's very dark up there. So, what? It went all night, but we stayed up there until I think 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, if you watch the sky every minute, I think we would see about 3 or 4 meteors, and you'd see them coming. So it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, this year I went up my roof this year, but there's too many lights around. You can't see; it's too bright. So yeah. So why don't we say these words: meteor, comet. And then the study of weather is meteorology. Meteorology. And then let's say that word there too, meteorologist. Meteorologist. And then he mentioned the study of our climate. Climate is chiho with an E at the end. So why don't we just first say that word, climate. Climate. Climatology. Climatology. And then I use these words, unpredictable. Unpredictable. Forecast. Forecast. Yeah, so I just on my way up here, I looked at my phone and it said, forecast 90% rain, 90% chance of rain. So I guess sometime today it's going to rain. I'm sure it will. Okay. So anyhow, going back to this, it said summer was the hottest on record. Of course, record is a 记录, right? It's the hottest summer that they've ever recorded, according to meteorologists. So here, let's go. Well, I'll read this. It says, Earth has sweltered through its hottest northern hemisphere summer ever measured, with a record warm August capping a season of brutal and deadly temperatures, the World Meteorological Organization said yesterday. So, we have meteorology, which is a study. We have a meteorologist, which is someone who studies that. And of course, meteorological, it becomes a 形容词. Okay, so meteorological organization. So I think we've talked about this word before. When we say sweltered or sweltering as a 形容词, what does that mean? Very hot. And when I think of the word swelter, I think it's not just hot. It's almost like, in my mind at least, it's hot and humid, Of course, it doesn't really mean humid, but for some reason in my mind, when I think of sweltering summers, I think of Taiwan in the summertime where it's hot, it's humid, you're sweating. But yeah, it just basically means very, very hot. So if you say we sweltered through something, it means we basically, went through we endured a hot conditions, very, very hot conditions. Maybe you could say I sweated my way through the summer, but sweltered. Now, of course, if we want to turn this into, often we use this as a 形容词, and we add an ing here, sweltering, the sweltering summer. It means it's just very, very hot. Okay, so why don't we say it together, swelter, swelter, and then as a 形容词, sweltering, sweltering. Right, so we could describe this, perhaps, I think we could call this sweltering weather. It's quite hot. Okay, so it's sweltered through its hottest northern hemisphere summer. Now, I think you know what hemisphere, right? You know what that means? Yeah, the Earth is divided into its northern half and its southern half, right? So I guess sometimes I guess people could talk about eastern and western too, but often we divide it between north and south. So northern hemisphere summer, of course, is what Taiwan has. But right now, of course, it's winter time in Australia, New Zealand, so that's the southern hemisphere, and they'll have their summer in a few months. But yeah, the hottest northern hemisphere summer ever measured. So let's say the word together, hemisphere. Hemisphere. Okay, with a record warm August capping a season of brutal and deadly temperatures. Now, if we say this August has capped a season, what does this word capping mean? Yeah, topping. It means the kind of at the peak, okay? You know, cap is like, you know, it could be like a mouth, right? Or it could be, means to cap something, means to put a lid on it. You know, like we have a bottle cap, right? When you have buy a bottle of tea, right? There's a cap, a plastic cap. And if you cap it, it means you close it off. So it can mean the peak of something, or to top something out, to end it. You know, the kind of the climax, the top of the summer. We say the peak of the summer. So here we say capping a season. In a way, it's like it finishes the season, it ends the season. Okay, we can say the concert was capped off by a great performance. It means this concert, this 音乐会, was finalized, or it was the peak of that concert was this performance, this song. Okay, so it's a word we use to kind of talk about the ending of something, but also the peak of something, the top of something. Okay, so a record warm August capping a season. Of course, this is summer, so it's a season of brutal and deadly temperatures. Now, brutal we've talked about before. What does brutal mean? Cruel. Yeah, we could say cruel. If someone, of course, if we describe a person as being brutal, it means they are brutal, cruel, but also cruel in a very, sometimes in a punishing way. Like you're not just cruel to somebody, but you hurt them. Okay, you punish them, you do something to them, you're violent or something like that. So if we talk about brutal weather or brutal temperatures, it means these temperatures are really hard to take. They're like punishing us. We could talk about, often we talk about the punishing heat, or the punishing cold, or the punishing weather. So I think that's a good 形容词 also to describe weather that's very difficult to take. You know, just like we say punishment, if someone punishes you, your parents punish you, or your teacher punishes you. But here we talk about the weather punishing us, the punishing cold, the punishing heat, the punishing weather. It's just like it's attacking us. It's very difficult. So I think this word here is similar to that. Why don't we say together, brutal, brutal, and then that word, punishing, punishing. I guess we could say cruel weather. The weather is very cruel. It's hard to take. So why don't we say that too? Cruel. Cruel. Okay. So yeah, these words all can describe weather when it's very difficult. And of course, deadly means that people have died, right? Because it's so hot. This happens, unfortunately, every summer. When it gets super hot, some people, they get heat stroke or something else. Okay, so brutal and deadly temperatures. The World Meteorological Organization. Let's say this word again. Meteorological. Meteorological. Yeah, it's a long word. Okay. Well, yeah, Florida. If you live in the Southwest, like Nevada or Arizona or Texas, I think some of those places you probably want an air conditioner. I don't know if you would say if you lived in parts of the desert like Nevada or Southern California or Arizona, yeah, I think the air conditioner would be almost necessary. But remember, if you go to some parts of America, it's much hotter than Taiwan, but it's very dry. And it's a very different kind of heat. I mean, it can be like 45 degrees, 45度. And you walk outside and, yeah, it's just this real super heat, but you're not really sweating. It's kind of weird. But in fact, that can be dangerous too, because if you're not sweating and it's super hot, yeah. So that wet, dry difference between Taiwan or humid countries like Taiwan and other dry countries makes a big difference. In the wintertime, it makes a big difference too. It can be 10 degrees below zero, and you can walk outside with just a light jacket. I'm not saying you can stay outside with a light jacket, but you don't feel it as much. Yeah. Yeah. They have some very interesting, if you notice, traditionally they wear those robes, right? They have a head covering. They wear white colors, light colors. The robe kind of actually cools them. You might think wearing more clothing would make you hotter, but the way they wear those clothes keeps them cooler. It was very interesting. Several years ago, I was in Oman. I was in Dubai. And Dubai has these very traditional buildings, and I forget what they call them, but they're these cooling towers. And in their traditional homes and buildings, this is like hundreds of years ago, they built these wind towers. I think that's what they call them, wind towers. And there's this tower in the building, and it's designed so that the air comes in and it goes through the building and it cools the whole building. It's like an ancient air conditioner, but it's very effective. You don't need this is before, of course, electricity and air conditioners, but they designed it so that the air moves very nicely through the house and keeps it cool. So yeah, it's kind of cool. If you ever go to Dubai or some of these Middle Eastern countries, they have these wind towers in old buildings. You can still see them. So anyhow, okay, so let's read this together. Earth has sweltered through its hottest northern hemisphere summer. Let's say it one more time. Hottest northern hemisphere summer ever measured, with a record warm August, capping a season of brutal and deadly temperatures. The World Meteorological Organization said yesterday. Okay. So it says last month was not only the hottest August scientists have recorded with modern equipment, it was also the second hottest month measured, behind only July, the WMO and the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service said. Okay, now, if I say it this way, I say it was not only this, I would say it was not only this, it was also, sometimes people would put but, not only this, but that also. So yeah, but here they say it was also. Anyhow, it's fine. So it was not only the hottest August scientists have recorded, so it was hot. It was also the second hottest month measured. So yeah, it's second hottest month ever measured, I think. That's what they means, ever. Okay. Behind July. So July was the hottest month ever measured, and August was the second hottest month. Okay. Do you know who Copernicus is? He's a very famous scientist. I don't know how you say his name in Cheng. Okay, yeah, so very famous. Why don't we say his name? Copernicus. Copernicus. Yeah, I think he's Greek, right? From Sheila, I think. Or Italian, maybe he's Italian. Yeah, Italian, yeah. Okay, so let's read this. Last month was not only the hottest August scientists have recorded, with modern equipment, it was also the second hottest month measured. Behind only July. The WMO and the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service said. Okay, I don't know why they call it service. It almost sounds like we will provide climate change for you. I don't know why they say climate change. I guess it's I don't know. Anyhow, it sounds kind of funny. Okay, so it says here, last month was about 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial averages. That is the threshold that the world is trying not to pass, although scientists are more concerned about rises in temperatures over decades, not merely a blip over a month. Okay, so first of all, I think you know C, and we'll say it one more time. We've said this before, but C stands for Celsius. In the old days, we would also say centigrade, but you don't hear the word centigrade too much anymore. Most times they say Celsius. This is what we use in Taiwan and most of the world. So 1.5 degrees C or Celsius warmer than pre-industrial averages. Now, they're referring to, I believe, we talk about the industrial age. And the industrial age is when the world or certain countries began to industrialize, right? So if we add the L-I-Z-E, industrialize means that your society or your country starts to build industry. And before industrialization, it is agricultural, right? 农业, right? And then like Taiwan used to be an agricultural society, and now it's an industrial society because the economy is based on industry. So we talk about the industrial age is when you have industry. 19th century. Yeah, if you look at, well, maybe it started in England in the late 18th century, but in the 19th century, you see a lot of, that's heavy industrialization in places like England and Europe and the United States. But yeah, so when they say pre-industrial averages, it means, warmer than before industrialization. So yeah, why don't we say this together? Industrial. Industrial. To industrialize. To industrialize. Pre-industrial. Yeah, and of course, I think you all know the word comes from industry, right? Which is what? 工业, right? So yeah, if you have, Taiwan has many industries. We talk about the high-tech industry or the semiconductor industry or the car industry. Okay, so that is the threshold that the world is trying not to pass. This word threshold is a very good word. Does anyone know what it means? Yeah, it's like when you have the door, the threshold of the door is that divider on the door that when you say, I'm going to cross the threshold, it means I'm going to enter a room, right? So that threshold, when you have a door, often there's like a bar down here at the bottom. It's kind of like that line between the entrance of the door. So to cross the threshold means to enter into a new place. But here, we're not talking about a door. We're talking about a threshold is usually like a limit, like a 限制, right? Like a line that we either want. So, for example, if someone says, we use this word in many ways. Sometimes we talk about someone's threshold for pain. It means what's the upper limit to pain that someone can take. I've heard that women have a much higher threshold for pain than men do, actually, mainly because they give birth, right? That's very painful. But yeah, so if we say his threshold for trouble, it means what's his limit? How much mafan can he take? What's the upper limit? So if we say the threshold, it means the upper limit, the maximum limit of something, okay? So often when we talk about the word to pass a threshold or to cross a threshold. So here, this 1.5 degrees increase is a threshold that the world is trying not to cross or pass. They don't want it to exceed 1.5 degrees increase. Okay, did everybody understand that? Okay, so why don't we say together, threshold. Threshold. Okay, so yeah, just remember, it is like the door, when you cross the threshold of a door, you enter a room, but here, it's usually today we use it to mean like the upper limit, the maximum limit, a line. Okay, although scientists are more concerned about rises in temperatures over decades, not merely a blip over a month. Now, this word blip is kind of funny. Does anyone know what that means? Yeah, it's like a jump, but it's almost like a small jump, okay? So what they're saying here is that, they're concerned with the long-term trend, okay? They don't want, if the weather is increasing gradually over time, That's what they're concerned with. They're not concerned with the weather suddenly goes like this, right? If your pattern is like this and suddenly there's a blip means like a small jump. So if you have a line and then suddenly it jumps, we say that's a blip. Okay, so it's a short-term thing. It doesn't last. It's not a long-term trend. So they're saying that they really care about how the weather changes over decades. 几十年, not just a short blip for 1 month. Okay, so why don't we say that word together? Blip. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay, so let's read this. Last month was about 1.5 degrees Celsius. Let's say it again. 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial averages. Pre-industrial averages. That is the threshold that the world is trying not to pass. Although scientists are more concerned about rises in temperatures over decades, not merely a blip over a month. Right. Now, of course, when we say merely, it means just, right? This is merely a short class. This is just a short class, not just a blip over a month. So that's what merely means. Okay, that's a photo caption. So it says here, the world's oceans, more than 70% of the Earth's surface, were the hottest recorded at nearly 21 degrees Celsius and have set high temperature marks for 3 consecutive months, the WMO and Copernicus said. Okay, so once again, what does consecutive mean? In a row, right? So if you say they have made money for 3 consecutive months, it means they have made money for 3 months in a row, like June, July, August, they've made money, or August, September, October. So 3 months in a row. So consecutive means back to. Sometimes we say back to back, right? Back to back, BACK, back to back means one to another. But back to back usually means measuring 2, right? If you say they made money back to back in October and September, or September and October. But yeah, consecutive could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. It can keep going. So let's say that word together, consecutive. Consecutive. Okay, so yeah, the world's ocean. So yeah, when we talk about weather, we're not only concerned about air temperature, we're also concerned about ocean temperature, because the water temperature, because that can have a very big impact on typhoons and other things. Yeah. Okay, so let's read this. The world's oceans, more than 70% of the Earth's surface, were the hottest recorded at nearly 21 degrees Celsius. And have set high temperature marks for 3 consecutive months. The WMO and Copernicus said. Okay. Now, of course, when we say high temperature mark, we're kind of talking about like a record or a mark. We say they set a new mark for profit, 记录 not 利息. Profit is making money. So a mark would be like a record, like a 记录. Okay. So yeah. Okay, now here's a funny expression. This is pretty funny. It says the dog days of summer are not just barking, they are biting. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a statement, climate breakdown has begun. So far, this year is the second hottest year on record behind 2016, Copernicus said. Okay, now this is a very funny expression. We say the dog days of summer. This is a very common expression. Does anyone know what that means? I don't think so. Maybe that's where it started. But when we talk about the dog days of summer, it just means the peak of summer, the very hot weather of summer. So it's an expression we hear a lot in America. We say, oh, right now we're going through the dog days of summer. It just means very hot weather. And I don't know why they call it dog days. Maybe. Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's where it came from. It's maybe, I don't know. That's something I'll have to go home and Google. But yeah, it's a very common expression. If you hear people talking about the dog days of summer, they don't talk about the dog days of winter or autumn or spring. It's only summer. Okay. So, but here, this UN Secretary General, he's taking this expression, dog days of summer, and he's kind of taking it further. He's kind of playing with it. And so he says the dog days of summer are not just barking. Okay. Now we don't say this is the expression here, but he's taken this idea and he's expanded it. So what does barking mean? Yeah. When a dog, when they make that sound, wah, 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 they bark. That's barking. And to my knowledge, only dogs bark. We don't say cats bark. We don't say, mice bark. Only dogs bark. People don't bark. It's a unique word we use for dogs. I don't think they even use it for like wolves or coyote, other, dog. Yeah, lions, tigers. No, we don't say that. Only dogs. So why don't we say together, barking? Barking. Yeah. No, I think I've seen barking dogs bite before. So yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. You probably experienced this before, but I've been bit by a barking dog before. So yeah. There's a very famous saying that he is talking about. Barking dogs don't bite. Okay, that means if a dog is barking at you, he won't bite you. But I think that's not true. Sometimes barking dogs do bite you. But there's this expression. There's actually more than one expression. Have you heard the expression, his bark is worse than his bite? Okay. Have you heard that one? Okay. These are funny expressions. I'll just write that one down because if we say, if you see someone and you say, don't worry, his bark is worse than his bite. What does that mean? Right. It means he's making a lot of noise. He sounds 很凶, right? Very, very tough, but he can't really do anything. He's harmless. Yeah. So don't worry about it. 你可以放心 because maybe he's making a lot of noise. Maybe he's yelling at you. Maybe he's 骂你, but he won't do anything. He sounds tough. What? Yeah. So we say, paper tiger. That's another way of saying it. Paper, 纸, right? Paper. Do you know that expression? If you say he is a paper tiger, it means he's not going to do anything. So we say his bark is worse than his bite. Don't worry about it. So why don't we say this together? Dog days of summer. Dog days of summer. His bark is worse than his bite. His bark is worse than his bite. Right. Okay. So here they say the dog days of summer are not just barking, they are biting. So this is kind of taking that expression a bit. He's saying, the summer, it's not just, it doesn't look bad. It's actually bad. It's actually creating damage. It's harming us. So he says, climate breakdown has begun. Now, of course, if the climate begins to break down, it means it's falling apart. It's got a serious problem. So he says climate breakdown has begun. And remember, we talked about the word climate means 气候, right? So we say climate breakdown has begun. And then, of course, so far this year is the second hottest year on records. It's very, very hot. Okay, so let's read this together. The dog days of summer are not just barking. They are biting. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a statement, climate breakdown has begun. So far this year is the second hottest year on record, behind 2016, Copernicus said. Copernicus said. Yeah, it sounds like Copernicus is actually talking, but this is referring to the organization, not Copernicus, the real person. Okay, so it says here, scientists blame ever-warming human-caused climate change on the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas with an extra push from a natural El Nino, which is a temporary warming of parts of the Pacific Ocean that changes weather worldwide. Usually, an El Nino, which started earlier this year, adds extra heat to global temperatures, but more so in its second year. Does everybody know? I don't know. How do you say this in Chinese? El Nino. Yeah, it's when the ocean, the Taiping-yang, the ocean starts to warm up and it changes the global weather and it creates all kinds of weird weather. And it's a Spanish word. Niño, I think it means baby, right? Okay, in Spanish. So when we pronounce this, it's like there's like a Y in here. So we say niño, niño. Yeah, not Nino, but niño. El Niña, yeah, Niña. La Niña, I don't. Yeah, I don't know what the difference is. I'm not a climatologist. Oh, really? Okay, okay. Well, I'll try to avoid saying that word. But yeah, El Nino, I think we're going through El Nino right now. So, maybe. Nino is boy, I think, and Nina is girl. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe, yeah. You'll have to ask the climatologist, yeah. So, or Google it, yeah. Ask Chat GPT. Yeah. So here it says scientists blame. Okay, when you blame something, you say it's their fault, right? I blamed him for this trouble. So the scientists are blaming what? What are they blaming for this weather, this hot weather? Ever warming human-caused climate change. So this, they're saying this ever warming means it's always warming. It's constantly warming. It keeps going up. Human cause, of course, people think our climate change is caused by humans. On what? What do they blame it on? They blame it on burning of coal. You know what coal is, right? What is it? Oil and natural gas. What is it? 天然瓦斯 or whatever, LPG. With an extra push. So when they say with an extra push, it means these are human cause, right? But an extra push means it with some extra help from what? From a natural, now this is not human caused, natural El Nino, which is a temporary warming of parts of the Pacific Ocean that changes weather worldwide. Okay, so yeah. So I guess it says here it adds extra heat to the global temperatures, but more so in its second year. So I guess the second year makes it even hotter than the first year of El Nino. Okay. Okay, so let's read this. Scientists blame ever-warming human-caused climate change on the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas with an extra push from a natural El Nino, which is a temporary warming. Let's say it again, temporary warming of parts of the Pacific Ocean that changes weather worldwide. Usually an El Nino, which started earlier this year, adds extra heat to global temperatures. Global temperatures, but more so in its second year. Right. Okay. So yeah, this is what's happening right now. So climatologist Andrew Weaver said that the numbers announced by WMO and Copernicus come as no surprise, adding that governments have not appeared to take the issue of global warming seriously enough. Okay. So here's that word, climatologist. We talked about meteorologists, right? Someone who studies the weather. Climatologist, he studies the climate. So he would be more concerned not with, if it's going to rain today or it's going to be sunny, but he's concerned with the change in the global climate, like global warming. So let's say that word one more time. Climatologist. Climatologist. Okay. Okay, so let's read this. Climatologist Andrew Weaver said that the numbers announced by WMO and Copernicus come as no surprise, adding that governments have not appeared to take the issue of global warming seriously enough. Okay. Let's read this sentence and then we'll go to a different story. Okay, I'll read this. He expressed concern that the public will just forget the issue when temperatures fall again. Okay, so when temperatures go down, when wintertime comes, people will forget about global warming. Okay, so let's read this. He expressed concern that the public will just forget the issue when temperatures fall again. Okay, so yeah, I'll be honest though, I've thought a lot about global warming and climate change and all this. I feel like there's a problem, right? Every day I pick up the newspaper and there's articles in there that kind of keep telling in the article they keep saying we have to pay attention, global warming, we're not doing enough, everything's getting worse. I think honestly a lot of people when they read this every single day, they give up. They just say, "Swanla, I can't do anything." Honestly, I think that's what I know. I have that attitude sometimes because every day when you read articles that say you're not doing enough, it's getting worse, nothing's enough, then I think people are just like, okay, Swanla, I'm just going to live my life and whatever happens. So I do think that the message, the way that they give this message to the public, perhaps needs to, I don't know, maybe they need to rethink how they give this message to the public. Because if every day you're just being told that nothing you do is enough, then after a while you just start to ignore it, right? It's kind of like if your parents tell you every day that what you're doing you're not studying hard enough. You're not doing enough. You need to work harder. And they just keep telling, even though you work hard, they keep saying you're not doing enough. You need to do more. Of course, what are you going to do? After a while, you're just going to say, okay, whatever. I don't care. Yeah. So I think that's what's happening. I think a lot of people are just saying, whatever. The climate's getting warmer. There's nothing I can do. So yeah, I think something needs to change in that message because people feel like they kind of give up. That's what I've heard. And I'll be honest with you. There are people who say, and I know this sounds a little bit perhaps most people would disagree with this, but there are people who say, hey, you know, this is not, this is part of a natural pattern, you know, that's happening. Now, I don't agree with that, but there are people that say, hey, the world, if you look at history, the world has gone through these hot and cold patterns, and you know, hey, it's just normal, and it's not going to, you know, make any difference. You know, this is the world will get colder, then it'll get hotter. So anyhow, yeah. So I think that this is one of those things that that we need to think about. I think we do need to do better on protecting our environment and our climate, but hopefully, you know, people will not just give up. Okay, so I want to show you a different article, and actually this article is kind of related to this. I think it's, in a way, it's related to this whole issue of global warming, and this is about a specific island that is, because what happens with, you just mentioned something kind of related, when global warming happens and glaciers start to melt. Does everybody know what a glacier is? Well, no, a glacier is a sheet of ice, right? And it's usually very, very, very thick, and it moves super, super slow, maybe a few centimeters every year, but it moves, and it creates, I mean, it's, if you go to Alaska or you go up north, you'll see these huge sheets of ice. I mean, they go on for miles and miles, you know, many, many, many kilometers. And so if you look at geology, you know, Dili, you can see the mountains and the plains. They are often formed by glaciers. So if the glaciers melt, of course, that sends a lot of water into the ocean. And often icebergs, you know, Bingshan, they come from glaciers. Like they break, if the glacier hits the ocean, pieces of the ice will break off and fall into the water and create these icebergs. And icebergs melting, that's also an issue, because when icebergs melt, they're huge, right? They can put all this water into the ocean, which then raises the sea level, and we have some of these issues. So why don't we say this together? This C is pronounced with a sh sound. So let's say glacier. Glacier. Okay, yeah, so there's glaciers. You can go visit glaciers in Alaska and other parts of the world and see these big ice. A fjord is like it's like a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a bay, but a very, very deep bay. So I believe it's a Norwegian word, and it's spelled very funny. It's got a J in it. But you know, if you have a sorry, I'll draw here. If this is the coast of a country, and here's the ocean, and here's the land, and then suddenly it goes deeply in, you know, and then it goes along, and then maybe it goes all the way in, and then so if you're sailing along, you can sail deep inside, and then you can come out or sail in. So it's like this very deep bay, often very narrow, and it's got, often when you think of fjords in Norway, especially Norway, they've got the mountains on both sides, and the ocean goes through, and ships can sail in there. It doesn't keep going; it ends at some point. So it's like a bay. It's like but a very narrow channel. So I have not. The only fjords I visited, interestingly enough, are not in Norway. They're in Zhongdong, in Oman. Yeah, and you can sail in, and it's not ice; it's desert. But the mountains go up on both sides, and you sail into this narrow, and it's really beautiful, but it's all desert. But they call it a fjord because it's a very long, deep channel that ends. It doesn't keep going. I don't know how you say it in Chinese. Yeah, when people think of Norway, they think of fjords. Okay, so why don't we say together? This is a funny word. It's pronounced fjord, like a Y, fee, and then Y-O-R-D, fjord. So why don't we say together, fjord. Yeah, so it's spelled really weird. So yeah, I remember in Oman, we took a boat into the fjords, and it was very funny because we were on this boat, my friend and I were on this boat, and the water was really beautiful. It was clear. And, you know, there was desert, these high mountains and desert, and there was nobody around. It was just a few little villages. And the guy in the boat, the boatman said, he said, if you want to swim, you can jump in. The water's great. And my friend and I were just about to jump in, and we were looking at the water, and we noticed that there were jellyfish. You know what jellyfish are? Yeah, and big ones. And they were everywhere. And so we were looking, we're like, hey, there's a jellyfish, and look, there's one there, and there's one there, and they were big. And we were like, okay, no, I don't think we want to go in the water because, yeah. So I think he knew. Probably, I don't know. Probably, yeah, maybe he knew. Maybe he was trying to. Maybe we didn't pay him enough. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. But it was kind of funny. I think he knew, but you probably could have swum there without getting stung by the jellyfish. But your chances of getting stung, I think, were pretty good because there were I noticed they were everywhere. So anyhow, so here we have, it says hundreds abandoned Caribbean island home. Now, Caribbean, you know where the Caribbean is, right? It's an ocean. Some people say Caribbean, and some people say Caribbean. And either way is okay. So why don't we say it both ways? First of all, Caribbean. 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 Yeah, and either way is fine. So it says hundreds abandoned Caribbean island home. Okay, so they're leaving their island home. So it says here, on a tiny Caribbean island, hundreds of people are preparing to pack up and move to escape the rising waters, threatening to engulf their already precarious homes. Okay, so they're going to escape the rising water. Remember, we talked about rising oceans, the water level is going up. These rising waters are threatening to engulf their already precarious homes. Now, this is a good word. I don't think we've ever learned this. What does engulf mean? Yeah, to swallow, to submerge. So when I think of engulf, I think of water. We were engulfed by the flood. Okay, so recently in Taiwan there was some heavy rain, and you could say the town was engulfed by floodwaters. It means it was covered by floodwater, or it was swallowed. So what was the word you said? But you just used another word. Swallowed, submerged. So let me just share some of these words with you. So to swallow, of course, you say the water swallowed something. To swallow, of course, is when you drink water, you swallow the water. You eat food, you swallow. But you can say the water swallowed the village. It covered the village. Submerge is a good word. Submerge means to put underwater. Okay? So you can say they submerged, the village was submerged by the floodwaters, or the town was submerged by the, or the submarine submerged itself in the water. So it basically means to be put underwater. Okay? So submerge, you can see that word sub, like submarine, right? To go underwater. Sub means below. So submerge. But here we have the word engulfed. So engulfed means to be like covered with water, to be, basically it means flooded, basically. We use the word flooding, flooded. Okay. So, if you have a flood, what is that? Yin shui, right? Okay. So why don't we say this word together? Engulf. Engulf. Right. So you can say we were engulfed by the typhoon flood. Okay. Flooded. Flooded. Swallowed. Swallowed. Submerged. Submerged. Okay. So this water, this rising water, is threatening to flood or engulf or submerge their already precarious homes. Now, what is precarious? If something is this is a 形容词. What does precarious mean? Yeah, in a very dangerous position, in a very dangerous state. Okay, so if you say his company is in a precarious situation, it means his company has got some serious problems. Maybe they're going to go out of business. They're going to go bankrupt or something like that. So, or let's say, you say he walked along the precarious trail. There's this one trail I really want to do above Tailuke in Hualien. where you climb up, and the trail's way up there, and the trail's only about this wide, and it's carved out of the rock. And if you fall way, way down, right? But it looks very cool. I really want to do this trail. But we could say that trail is very precarious because it's dangerous, right? You could fall. And so, or you can say this house is in a precarious situation. It might fall. Like I saw when we had heavy rain from the typhoon, I think it was in, I don't know, Pingdong or Taidong or somewhere. But anyhow, there was flooding on the river, and you saw these buildings, and it looked like they might fall into the water or be, engulfed by the floods. So yeah, why don't we say this together? Precarious. Precarious. And this is a good word. We can use it to describe a person, situation, a house, a business, anything that's in danger. Okay, so let's read this. On a tiny Caribbean island, hundreds of people are preparing to pack up and move to escape the rising waters threatening to engulf their already precarious homes. Let's say it again. Already precarious homes. Right. So their homes were already precarious. It's not just because of this flood. They're already kind of in a slightly dangerous kind of situation. So it says here, surrounded by idyllic clear waters, the densely populated island of Cartisugtupu, I don't know how to pronounce that, off Panama's north coast, has barely an inch to spare, with houses crammed together, some jutting out into the sea on stilts. Okay, so first of all, I love this word idyllic. Does anyone know what that word means? Well, it means very peaceful, very relaxing, very beautiful, kind of beautiful. We always talk about idyllic scenery or an idyllic setting, environment. It means when you think of you look at a picture of an island or countryside, and it's beautiful, and it's when you look at it, you feel very peaceful and relaxed. We say that's very idyllic. But we can also use it to describe other things. You can say, I enjoyed a very idyllic vacation. It's very relaxing, very peaceful. So yeah, it's a good word. I like it. Why don't we say together, idyllic? Idyllic. So, this water, it's very clear, probably very blue. And when you look at it, you're like, oh, that looks beautiful. So surrounded by idyllic clear waters, the densely populated island. So, of course, when we say densely, it means there's lots of people living together. Now, what would be the opposite of densely populated? Yes. So we would say, if we say a place is sparsely populated, it means there's not many people there. It's not heavily populated. And these two words are opposites. We always say densely populated or sparsely populated. Of course, Taiwan is usually, most places in Taiwan are very densely populated. Not all. If you go to the mountains, it's more sparsely populated. Okay, so why don't we say together, densely populated. Densely populated. And then that word there, sparsely populated. Sparsely populated. Okay, so this island is off Panama, north coast, has barely an inch to spare. So if we say barely an inch to spare, it means that there's no space. There's, almost no, an inch is this big, right? So if we say barely an inch to spare, it means that there's no extra room, okay? So barely an inch to spare. If you say to spare means I have extra, right? If someone says, can you spare a minute for me? Or means, do you have an extra minute for me? Okay, so to spare, with houses crammed. Cram means, of course, pushed together, jammed together. We could say jammed, Jammed, jammed together, crammed together. Some jutting out into the sea. Okay, so when we say something juts out, what does that mean? Yeah, it means it sticks out, okay? So, I don't know, sometimes when you look at a building and something is sticking out, like a crane. I know in Taiwan, when they build buildings, they have these tall cranes, and they jut out, they stick out, okay? So we say jutting out, or a mountain. Sometimes you look at a mountain and there's a piece of the mountain that sticks out. So we say it juts out. Jutting out into the sea, sticking out into the sea on stilts. And what are stilts? Yeah, I'm sure you've seen houses like this in, around the ocean, where you have the house, and then, it's on these long sticks on the ocean. The ocean's here, and there's these stilts. So the house is above the water. The reason why we have these stilts is because if the water goes up, then it won't flood the house. Okay, but there's another kind of stilts. You've probably seen this. I think they have in Taiwan, when people walk on these sticks. They're very tall. Yeah, and you walk on them, and so it makes you much taller, right? And we call those stilts. Sometimes we call those people stilt walkers. I remember as a kid trying it. I didn't have the real tall ones, but you try them. Maybe they're this high, and you have to put your feet on top of them, and you try to walk. It's difficult, but you can do it. Okay, so why don't we say this together? Jutting out. Jutting out. Stilts. Stilts. Okay, so let's read this together. Surrounded by idyllic clear waters. Let's say it again. Idyllic clear waters. The densely populated island of Karti Sugtupu off Panama's north coast has barely an inch to spare, with houses crammed together, some jutting out into the sea on stilts. Stilts. Okay. So it says here, the island's indigenous community of fewer than 2,000 people scrapes by without potable water or sanitation. Now, first of all, what is indigenous? Yeah. So it's in Taiwan, we say the Taiwanese indigenous people are the 原住民, right? And the word that we often use is Aborigine. Okay. I've been told that when we say Aborigine, we should use a big A because it's a group of people, it's an official group. So Aborigine, when actually in Taiwan, we used to use this word Aborigine more, but I've noticed the government likes to use the word indigenous. So it means the original people, the 原住民. Literally 原住民, the people who were here originally. Okay, so why don't we say together indigenous, indigenous, Aborigine, Aborigine. Yeah, both words are okay. And many places have indigenous people. Now, indigenous, this specific word can also be used to describe plants or animals that are originally from that place. So we can talk about what indigenous animals does Taiwan have, or indigenous plants that Taiwan has. It's interesting how if you go around the world, many places like Taiwan, it seems like over half the plants are not indigenous. We say N-O-N, non-indigenous. There's another word we use if you find an animal or plant that's not indigenous. We say it's invasive species. Species, of course, is a kind of animal or plant, right? A species, like a dog or a frog or cat or whatever. There's types of plants and animals. Invasive, of course, comes from the word to invade, right? People often worry about China invading Taiwan, right? But we talk about plants or animals being invasive. So I think I told you when I go to Hawaii a lot, Hawaii. And if you go to Hawaii, it's beautiful. There's all these plants and trees and animals. But a large percent of the animals and trees and plants in Hawaii are invasive. They weren't there originally. They came over, sometimes they came through natural, on the ocean. They floated over on coconuts or whatever. And then sometimes people brought them to Hawaii. But they, places like that, they try to the government often tries to protect the local environment from invasive species. I'll tell you, in America, one of the especially in Florida, the state of Florida, one of the biggest invasive species is the problem they just cannot control. And they hunt them, they try to kill them, but they just keep increasing. Does anyone know? Not crocodiles. Crocodiles are okay. But there's another big animal that they cannot wipe out in Florida. Anyone know? Not rabbits. I'll write it for you. I don't know if you know what this is. Python. Giant snake, sir. Yeah, they're the big snakes, and they're huge. I mean, they're like from here to there. They somehow I don't know how they started, but they're, Florida has a lot of swamp. You know what swamp is? Where it's very wet, there's a lot of water, and there's lots of plants. So pythons love this environment. And so they keep increasing and multiplying. So they go out and they catch these snakes, but there's just thousands and thousands of them, and they just keep increasing. Taiwan has a similar problem with another animal. I see this in the news a lot. It's called, no? Sorry, that's an A. Iguana. Does anyone know what an iguana is? It's a big lizard. They're green. How do you say this? Does anyone know? Yeah. Well, chameleon can change its color, but iguanas are these big lizards. Yeah. Lizard. Lizard is like bihu is a kind of lizard, right? But iguanas are big, and they don't come from Taiwan. They come from, I think, South America or something. But I heard especially in Nambu, there's these iguanas everywhere, and the government will pay you if you hunt them, right? You can catch them. They sit up in the trees, and they love Taiwan. I think the climate, in Taiwan, the climate is very warm, right? Usually warm, and it's, sunny, and it rains. So tropical animals, 热带 animals and plants, they love Taiwan, just like they like Hawaii, shall we? Yeah. So anyhow, these animals are very invasive. These plants are invasive. So why don't we say these words together? Let's a lot of new words here. Python. Swamp. Lizard. Iguana. So this has a W sound. Iguana. Yeah, sorry, that's two words here. Iguana, yeah. And then invasive species. Invasive species. Remember, species is a kind of plant or animal. So yeah. But yeah, lizard, again, this word lizard is a kind of animal. It's not a specific animal. Like a bihu, gecko is a kind of lizard, right? And bihu are great. I love lizards. I love bihu. Geckos, right? You don't like them? About 5 years ago, I don't know how, because I live on the 6th floor, a gecko got into my apartment, and it was great because he ate all the bugs, the little, they have these little tiny zanglang, you see them in Taiwan. They started to disappear because he was eating them, right? And so it was great. I loved it. And he was there for about 2 years. We became 好朋友, right? And then one day he disappeared. I think maybe he died, but I was very sad because I used to see him every day, and then one day he wasn't there. He didn't show up. I know. And you know what I would do? Sometimes I would, these little tiny zanglang you see in Taiwan, right? If I would kill one, I would put it on the floor, and he would come out and he would eat it. There was definitely only one, because I got to know him. You could recognize him. He had certain. Yeah. We were 朋友. Yeah. But I almost feel like I'm almost tempted to, when I see bihu outside, I'm tempted to catch one and bring it back to my apartment so that he can, make my home his home. So yeah, because it really does help. They eat the bugs in the house. They're very good hunters. Yeah. Okay, so anyhow, it says here and in case you're wondering, bihu is this word, Gecko, gecko. Gecko. I think they're called gecko because of the sound they make. They make that sound, that gecko, that sound. Gecko. Why don't we say it together? Gecko. Gecko. And there's many, many, many kinds of geckos. Taiwan's geckos are about like this, But if you go to like Indonesia, like Bali, I remember they're this big and they're huge. I mean, they're enormous. They have small ones too, but they have these huge ones, and they have colors on them. They're very beautiful. But I remember when I went to Bali the first time, I was staying in my kind of a house. I rented a house, and one night I came home and I looked up and there was this huge gecko way up on the roof there. I mean, they're really big. So yeah. Anyhow, they're great. So it says here, the island's indigenous community of less than 2,000 people scrapes by without potable water. Now, potable, what's this word mean? Drinkable. So potable water means you can drink it safely. Of course, you can drink anything, but you might get very, very sick, right? But if the water is potable, it means it's okay for you to drink. It's healthy for you to drink. Yeah. I don't think so. I've never seen it. Potable is a 形容词, and I've never seen it used in any other way. But yeah, it's very important that we have potable water, right? There's water that you can actually drink safely. So why don't we say the word together? Potable. Potable. Okay, so they scrape by without potable water or sanitation. Of course, sanitation means, toilets and running water and things that keep your place clean. Now, when we say scrapes by, what does that mean? Yeah, it means to survive, to get by. If you say I'm scraping, let's say, for example, you don't make much money. Let's say you only make, 15,000块 a month, and you say, right now I'm scraping by on 15,000块 per month. When you say scrape by, it means you're barely surviving, you're barely getting by. It's, if you're only making 15,000 per month, that in Taiwan, that would not be much money. You could barely survive on that kind of money. So we can say he's scraping by on his salary, or he's scraping by on a very not much food. It means you're barely surviving. You don't have much. Okay, so the people scrape by without potable water, so the water is dirty actually, or sanitation. Okay, everybody understand that? Okay, so let's read this. The island's indigenous community, let's say it again, indigenous community of fewer than 2,000 people scrapes by without potable water or sanitation. Sanitation. Now, of course, sanitary, sanitary, means clean, right? If something is sanitary, they say wash your hands, keep your hands and to clean your hands, we could say to sanitize, Tize. Sanitize your hands with soap and water. It means to clean your hands with soap and water. During COVID-19, people use many ways to sanitize their hands, alcohol, other things to keep themselves clean. Hand sanitizer, buy those little bottles of that gel and you clean your hands. Yeah. Okay, that's a photo caption. So it says here, they live off fishing, the harvesting of starchy crops such as cassava and plantain, traditional textile production, and a bit of tourism. Okay, so when we say they live off, it means how do they make a living? What do they make money from? They live off of fishing. Of course, they go fishing. Harvesting, you know what harvest means, right? When every year in Taiwan, they harvest the rice, 3 times a year? They cut the rice. I thought it was 3 times, or is there 2 times? Okay, anyhow, harvesting of what? Starchy crops. Now, a crop, of course, is rice, wheat, millet. There's many kinds of crops that we harvest. Peanuts, all kinds of things. What does starch or starchy mean? Yeah. So what are some starchy foods that we like to eat? Yeah, bread, rice, potatoes. Yeah. Corn, I guess corn is starchy, yeah. But yeah, anything with that starch. So when we talk about starchy food, it means food with a lot of starch. Okay, so let's say together, starch, starch, starchy. How do you say starch in Chinese? Okay, yeah, so anyhow. The harvesting of starchy crops such as cassava. Now, cassava is not a plant I see in Taiwan. I've seen it in Dongnanya. It's like a root, a kind of gun, and you can eat it. I don't know how to say it in Chinese, but it's not. I don't see it in Taiwan. Maybe, I don't know. And plantain is actually similar to a sweet. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, banana. It's like a banana. It's like a xiangjiao. It's a kind of xiangjiao, actually. So we say called a plantain. In fact, it looks like a banana. Okay, traditional textile production. This is what they also do. Now, what does textile mean? Textile is anything to do with cloth or clothing. So we say Taiwan has a textile industry, right? They make clothing. They make jackets, cloth, anything like that. We talk about textiles. So why don't we say together textile? Textile. And this is, of course, traditional clothing, traditional textile production, and a little bit of tourism. Okay, so why don't we say this together? They live off fishing, the harvesting of starchy crops, such as cassava and plantain. Traditional textile production and a bit of tourism. Okay. It is not an easy life with intense heat and a lack of public services, adding to the discomfort of overcrowded conditions on an island the size of 5 soccer fields. Okay, that's not very big. You know, 足球场, right? One soccer field is it's not big, and so this island the whole island is the size of 5 soccer fields. 足球场. Okay, so he says it's not an easy life with intense heat. Of course, intense means very strong, right? Sometimes Taiwan also has intense heat and a lack of public services. So of course, public services would be like running water, electricity, post office, all those things are public services, okay? Adding to the discomfort, okay, of overcrowded conditions. So if your environment is overcrowded, there's too many people, it's not comfortable. So we say discomfort. I feel discomfort. Actually, many things can give us a feeling of discomfort. Okay, so yeah, let's read this. It is not an easy life with intense heat and a lack of public services, adding to the discomfort of overcrowded conditions on an island the size of 5 soccer fields. Okay, so now we have the problem. It says, now climate change induced sea level rise is threatening to make life even more difficult. Okay, so climate change, we've been talking about that. But when we say induced, what would be another word for induced? Caused, yeah. You can say, if you eat really spoiled food, 已经宠坏了, food that's gone bad, it will induce, vomiting, maybe you throw up too, or, 拉肚子 or whatever. But we say it was induced by something. What caused it, okay? So why don't we say together, induced. Okay. Climate change induced. It means caused by climate change. sea level rise is threatening to make life even more difficult, because the ocean, they live so close to the ocean. Okay, so let's read this. Now, climate change induced sea level rise is threatening to make life even more difficult. Okay, and that's a photo caption, so let's go on. It says here, with homes already flooded on a regular basis, experts say the sea would engulf Kardi Sugtupu and dozens of neighboring islands in the Gunayala region by the end of the century. So the end of the century is about, 75 years away. Okay, so homes already flooded on a regular basis means regularly, right? We could say, instead of this, we could simply say, add an ly here, we could, as a food, so we could say regularly or on a regular basis. That either way is the same. Okay, experts say the sea would engulf, there's that word again, engulf, this island and dozens of neighboring islands, next door islands in this region by the end of the century. Okay, so let's read this. With homes already flooded on a regular basis, experts say the sea would engulf Kardi Sugtupu and dozens of neighboring islands in the Gunayala region by the end of the century. Okay, so here it says 49 of the isles are populated and the rest just less than 1 meter above sea level. We have noticed that the tide has risen. Retired teacher Magdalena Martinez, 73, said as she sat embroidering a brightly colored toucan onto a mola cloth traditional to the Guna people on Kardi Sugtupu. Okay, so there's some interesting words here. It says, first of all, this word here, isle, okay? So isle is simply another word, usually means like island. But it's sometimes I think when we say isle, sometimes it means like a very small island. But yeah, we can use the word instead of island. Sometimes also I've seen the word islet, I-S-L-E-T-S, has the same idea, but it also means small island. So why don't we say together isle? Remember that we don't pronounce the L-E, so we just say isle. Okay, so the 49 of these isles are populated with the rest just 1 meter above sea level. That's only like this high above the water. Okay, so we have noticed that the tide has risen. And what is this word tide? Not a wave. Every day if you go to Kunding, the tide will come in the morning, I think, and I always get confused. The tide goes out in the morning, and then it comes back in the evening. So how do we say it in Chinese? Yeah. So, there are some places in the world where the tide really, wasn't there just, I saw this on the news last week. There's some place down in Jiayi or Pingdong or Tainan where the Gangkou was flooded because the tide went very high and it was caused by the moon. The moon was very big recently. We say a blue moon, right? And so the tide was really up very high and the Haixian, Tanwei and all that were underwater. The water was up to here because the tide was up extra high. I think the moon really does have a big impact on the tide. There's probably other ways. Like, for example, sometimes we talk about a storm tide. So if you have a typhoon or a hurricane, sometimes that'll cause the water to rise very high. The ocean water will rise very high. So we call that a storm tide. It's not caused by the moon. Okay, so why don't we say the word together? Tide. Tide. And we always talk about high tide and low tide. Okay, so we've noticed the tide has risen. Retired teacher, this teacher said, as she sat embroidering. Now, what does embroider mean? I don't think we've ever talked about this word. Yeah. I don't know. It's like knitting, right? When you embroider, like you can make a sweater or a shirt. and you use usually wool, wool, wool. Yeah, so you embroider. How do you say that in Chinese? Yeah. Yeah, so knitting, there's many kinds of weaving. Weaving's a very general word. Like even you can say all clothing are woven, right? We talk about the word woven as a 形容词. I mean, there's I think all cloth is kind of woven. We can say weaving. Weaving is very, very ancient. It goes back. But knitting is when it's like embroidering. When you're making something, you often have two knitting needles. We call them needles, although they're very big, and they knit. Some of my friends enjoy knitting when they're bored. You know, 很无聊, they'll just sit there and knit and make sweat. Or I've seen in America, I don't know about Taiwan, but sometimes older people, you know, they have lots of time, right? So they will knit sweaters for their grandchildren or clothing for their grandchildren. There's a cafe in Taichung that opened about a year and a half ago on Chengdu Lu. It's called the Knitting Cafe. And in there, the food is good and the coffee is good, but they specialize in knitting. You can go there and learn how to do knitting. And it's run by a couple from Hong Kong. The Laoban is a married couple from Shanghai, and they came here and they opened this cafe, and it's called the Knitting Cafe. So you can learn how to knit if you want to do that. But this word embroider is also a 动词, and it's the same kind. It's like a kind of knitting. So if you buy, you can say embroidered sweater, or to learn that art is called embroidery with a Y, R-Y, embroidery. So someone might say, embroidery is my hobby. I enjoy embroidery. Or you could say I enjoy knitting. But embroidery is, yeah, we often talk about this. So why don't we talk about this embroider, embroidery. Okay, yeah, so it's like knitting. Oh, let's say that too. Knitting, weaving. Okay, so she sat embroidering a brightly colored toucan. Now, toucan is a bird, okay? And if a bird that has a very bright, his beak has many colors on it. It's a tropical bird, I think. But yeah, he has a long beak and it's got colors on it, and he's a very colorful bird. And we call it, it's not a parrot. It's not a parrot is a, how do you say parrot in Chinese? 鹦鹉. Yeah, this is not an 鹦鹉. This is a different kind of bird. Yeah. So why don't we say together, toucan. Okay, so she was knitting. Obviously, it's not a real toucan, but she was embroidering, creating a picture of a toucan onto a mola cloth. It's a kind of cloth, traditional to these people, these Guna people. I'm sure these are like Yuanzhuming, Guna people on this island. Okay, so let's read this. We have noticed that the tide has risen. Tide has risen. Retired teacher Magdalena Martinez let's say it again. Magdalena Martinez, 73, said as she sat, embroidering a brightly colored toucan, I think it's toucan, I'm not sure, onto a mola cloth, traditional to the Guna people on Kardi Sugtupu. Okay, so I want to say something. We say traditional to. We're using the word, we can say this is traditional to them. It means this is their tradition. For example, we might say giving a hongbao is traditional to Taiwanese or Chinese culture. You give a hongbao to somebody. Just like I think I told you, I found out several years ago that giving a baibao is traditional to Japanese weddings. That's very different from Taiwan. I almost wonder, I was kind of thinking, does that mean something in Japan when you get married, you give a baibao? Does that mean your life is over, or what is it? Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, but yeah, so it says here, we think we're going to sink. We know it's going to happen, she said. Let's keep reading. Martinez is one of hundreds of inhabitants of the island expecting to move soon to a settlement on mainland Panama newly built by the government, a move that might save the islanders, but puts at risk their culture and way of life. Now, of course, we could say puts their culture and way of life at risk, but they've taken the word at risk and put it up here. So we can say puts at risk their culture and life, or puts their culture and life at risk. Either way is okay. Okay, at risk, you know what that means, right? 风险, right? Okay, so she is, let's see here, hundreds. What does inhabitant mean? Resident, right? You can say, I think we are all inhabitants of Taichung. Normally we'd probably say resident, but inhabitant is okay also. Why don't we say together, inhabitants? Inhabitants. And of course, that comes from the verb 动词, to inhabit, right? Why don't we say together, to inhabit? Inhabit. Okay, so inhabitants of the island are expecting to move soon to a settlement. A settlement's like a small village or a community. Okay, on mainland Panama. Mainland, of course, is like Dalu, right? Mainland Panama, newly built by the government. So they built this new community, but they might lose their culture when they do that, of course. Okay, so let's read this. We think we're going to sink. We know it's going to happen, she said. Martinez is one of hundreds of inhabitants of the island expecting to move soon to a settlement on mainland Panama. Panama, newly built by the government. A move that might save the islanders, but puts at risk their culture and way of life. Okay, so she says, okay, let's read this. This will change our lifestyle quite a bit, Martinez said. However, it won't change our spirit. It won't change our habits, she added. Okay, so habits are what? What are habits? 习惯, right? Okay, we have many different kinds of habits. I think I've told you, when foreigners come to Taiwan and they work here, one of the most common habits they notice, unique habits they notice among Taiwanese, I think I've told you this before. They all tell me this. Why, go and notice this at work. What do Taiwanese like to do after they eat lunch? Not all Taiwanese, but many. Take a nap, right? Foreigners come in, they're like, what's going on? Why is everybody, are you feeling sick, or why are you sleeping at your desk? You know, and the lights are off too, and you know, it's so quiet. So in America, we don't take naps unless you're very, very young or very, very old. Okay, if you're in 幼稚园 or you're like 70 years old, maybe you take a nap, but not normally. I think I shared with you, even in Singapore, you're not allowed to take a nap in your office. If you do, your boss will, you'll get in trouble. So my Singaporean friends say you cannot sleep at your desk in the office. And I might have told you, I talked to a Taiwanese engineer. I think he was in Singapore or he was somewhere else. He was so desperate to take a nap at lunchtime after he ate lunch that he would go into the 厕所 and he would sit in the 厕所 and sleep in there because he couldn't sleep at his desk, right? So, or I think some people said they went out to their car and they sat in the car and slept because they couldn't sleep in the office. So yeah, taking a nap is a Taiwanese habit. Okay, why don't we say together, habit? Habit. But here's a broader word. Lifestyle, of course, is the way you live, right? We talk about our, sometimes I say our culture, our lifestyle is part of our culture, how we live. What is our lifestyle? Taichung has a very a more relaxing lifestyle than Taipei, right? People are a little bit more 轻松的, or we say a slow pace lifestyle, a slow moving lifestyle. The lifestyle is a little bit slower than maybe Taipei. Okay, so let's read this. This will change our lifestyle quite a bit. Martinez said. However, it won't change our spirit. It won't change our habits, she added. Okay, so, okay, I want to go to one more story. Any questions about this article? Yeah. Yeah. Pastoral is a word that we use more for like 乡下, like countryside or farming. You know, it has that idea of a farming. Like if you look at a lot of European art, 艺术, they have pastoral pictures, you know, pictures of the farms and pictures of the countryside, you know, 乡下. And so we say that's a pastoral scene. But idyllic, pastoral describes that kind of scene, whereas idyllic is more of a feeling that you get. Not pastoral. Idyllic could be like an ocean scene that's very idyllic. Yeah. Like they said, the idyllic blue water, idyllic seaside. But I just saw this story today and I thought, this is crazy. Of course, this is China, so China has a lot of crazy stories. Yeah. Just for your information, he used the word pastoral. It's P-A-S-T-O-R-L. It's kind of like it means kind of like country, farming, that kind of scene. So when you look at a pastoral picture of a farm or people working on a farm or they're in the countryside, that's kind of what that idea is. It's not a very common word. Idyllic is a much more common word. Okay, so I read this story today. It says Mole's law banning clothes that hurt feelings. Okay. So I thought, when I saw this, I thought, what? So first of all, what does mole mean? What's another word for mole? No, to mull, if you are mulling something over, what does that mean? To think about, to consider, okay? You can say the government is mulling a new law. It means they're considering a new law. But you could say, I'm mulling over an idea to change my job. You know, it means I'm thinking about or I'm considering. So to mull means to kind of think about. Why don't we say together, mulls? Mulls. Okay, so they're thinking about a law that bans. Ban is to what? Prohibit, right? To prohibit, you know, we often say, if you ban or you prohibit, to not allow, to prohibit. Why don't we say together, prohibit, prohibit, ban. Okay, clothes that hurt feelings. And when I saw this, I thought, what clothes would hurt your feelings? Okay, so it says here, Chinese are expressing concern about a potential legal change that would allow for fines and even jail time for people who offend the government's sensibilities by wearing the wrong clothing. And I thought, you know, so even the Chinese are concerned. They're worried about this potential. Potential means it's not yet. It could happen. It's potential, right? 可能. So why don't we say together, potential. Okay, legal change means legal law change that allow fines and even jail time for people who offend. Of course, offend means if you offend somebody, you make them upset or you go against something that they want. Offend the government's sensibilities. Now, sensibility is a word that means your, how do you explain this? It means like your feelings, your sensibilities about something. It means the way you feel about something. Okay, kind of, that's what it means. Your sensibilities by wearing the wrong clothing. So if you offend somebody, a person's sensibilities, maybe you do something that offends them. You do something that hurts their feelings or makes them feel bad, or it goes against their ideas or their beliefs. Why don't we say together, sensibilities? Sensibilities. Okay, so let's read this. Chinese are expressing concern about a potential legal change that would allow for fines and even jail time for people who offend the government's sensibilities. Let's say it again, sensibilities. By wearing the wrong clothing. It says here, the Chinese Communist Party Politburo Standing Committee recently released a draft of revisions to the law it is considering that would forbid a range of behavior, including dress or speech, detrimental to the spirit of the Chinese people and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. Okay, so I will say that whenever the Gongchangdang wants to attack someone or criticize, they say, you have hurt our feelings. Foreigners think this is 很好笑 because it's like, am I hurt the feelings of all the Chinese people? They're all upset about something, but the government, they really love to use this term. You have hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. If you do that, you have hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. So this is like the leadership of the Gongchangdang. We say Politburo, that's the leader, a group, a larger group, and standing committee is the people at the very, very top, okay? Recently released a draft. Now, draft means it's not the final version, right? If you write a report for school, you have a draft and then you have a final version. Draft version means it's not final. So a draft of revisions. What's another word for revision? Well, there's a very simple word for revision. Even more simple. Change. Yeah, changes. A draft of changes, revisions, because to revise, R-E-V-I-S-E means to change, right? To revise, 改变. Revisions to the law. Okay, so let's say this word together. Revisions. Revisions. So you could say, I need to make many revisions to my article or to my report. A draft of revisions to the law, changes to the law, it is considering, that would do what? Would forbid, prohibit, ban, that's another word, forbid, a range, means a variety of behavior, including dress or speech, detrimental to the spirit of the Chinese people. When we say something is a detriment or detrimental, what does that mean? It's a very good word. Harmful, damaging, okay? So there's a very, very common warning that you see when you buy cigarettes in America. It says smoking is detrimental to your health. It means smoking can damage your health. It can hurt your health. So if something is detrimental to anything, it means harmful to. It can damage. So we say a detriment to means is a 名词. A detriment is a 名词, but detrimental is a 形容词. Okay? This is detrimental. Okay, so why don't we say this together? Detriment. Detriment. Detrimental. Detrimental. So this is damaging or harmful to the spirit of the Chinese people and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. Okay, so let's read this. The Chinese Communist Party Politburo Standing Committee recently released a draft of revisions to the law it is considering that would forbid a range of behavior, including dress or speech, detrimental to the spirit of the Chinese people and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. Okay. The lawmakers did not spell out exactly what could get people sent to a detention center for up to 15 days or fined up to 5,000 yuan. They have listed the law among their priorities for this year. Okay, now lawmakers, that's any kind of person that passes a law, like a Li Wei in Taiwan or a congressman. When it says they did not spell out exactly, that means they did not specify, they were not specific. Okay, so specify is a 动词, or you say they were not specific, they did not spell out. So if someone says, please spell out what you plan to do, means please be specific. Spell out, it's almost like to spell a word, right? To be specific. So they did not spell out exactly what could get people sent to a detention center. Of course, a detention center is like jail, 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 right? Like a, for up to 15 days or fined up to 5,000 yuan. Okay, but they want to make this a priority. They want to pass this new law. Okay, so let's read this. The lawmakers did not spell out. Spell out. Exactly what could get people sent to a detention center for up to 15 days or fined up to 5,000 yuan. They have listed the law among their priorities for this year. Let's say that word again, priorities. Okay, so if you say, this year my priority is to save more money or to lose weight or to do something like that. Okay, so it says the draft law highlights how Chinese President Xi Jinping has clamped down on civil liberties in the nation of about 1.4 billion people over his decade in power, including by stepping up internet censorship. Now, I think you know the word censorship, right? What does that mean? Censorship comes from the verb to censor, right? And to censor means what? To control, to monitor. If you censor the internet, you say, okay, this, we have to take that out. This can stay in, that needs to go. You can censor what? Books. You can censor movies. You can censor music, the internet. It means you take things out that you don't like. So we say to censor. Why don't we say together, censor. Censor. We can censor speech, our free speech, right? Censor. So, and then this word, censorship. Censorship. Now, of course, when we say stepping up, it means to increase censorship. The law highlights, okay, we could say underlines, emphasizes, highlights how Chinese President Xi has clamped down. Now, clamp down, I think you know, means to restrict. Okay, if you want to use just a normal word, we could say to restrict, to limit, 限制, to crack down. Sometimes we say to crack down on something. To restrict, to crack down. Why don't we say together, restrict, restrict, crack down, clamp down, clamped down. Yeah, limit, of course, but this is severely limit, not just limit a little bit. Okay, let's read this. The draft law highlights how Chinese President Xi Jinping has clamped down on civil liberties. Civil liberties. In the nation of about 1.4 billion people, let's say it again, 1.4 billion people over his decade in power, including by stepping up internet censorship. Okay, I forgot to mention this word civil liberties. does anyone know what civil liberties means? Yeah, it means basic rights that you have usually in a democracy, 民主. What would be some of our civil liberties in Taiwan? Protest, 抗议, free speech, right? We can write whatever we want. So it's basic freedoms. So, civil means like for our society, liberty means freedom, right? So basic freedoms that we have or we should have, like free speech and, the right to protest and things like that. So why don't we say together, civil liberties? Okay. I think that's all we have time for today, but I was reading this and I was thinking, yeah, this is why, if you go to China and they're like, sorry, your clothes offend me. They hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. Go to jail. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you have to be careful what you wear there. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, or the government, the 共产党 has a heart of glass. I don't know about the Chinese people, but yeah, the CCP always claims to represent the people of China, but I don't think they really do, right? They say, well, you're hurting the feelings of the Chinese people. Actually, they're hurting their feelings, not the feelings of the Chinese people. So yeah, but yeah, okay. Anyhow, that's all we have time for today. So we'll see you next time. Have a good week. Thank you.